Hello everyone, SimCFI here, and today we're going to do what everybody's been wanting me to do, and that's an IFR flight. We're here with the A2A simulation Cessna 182. We're at Chico Airport in Northern California, and we're going to fly to Redding, and we're going to fly the ILS to runway 34. So let's get inside the airplane here. Let's start taking down the control lock. We'll get the master on. Turn all the stuff on. Drop the flaps. Avionics looks like they're working, so we'll turn that off. Let's get the cowl flaps open. Fuel left tank. Let's get outside. Take a quick look around at all the lights. So landing light, taxi light are working. Our nav and strobe is working on the left wing. The beacon is working. The tail position light is working. That's part of the nav lights. And we have our green nav light and our strobe light. And then starting the pre-flight, getting here real quick. Here we go. So the very first step in the pre-flight, we'll get rid of that pitot tube cover and we'll test the pitot heat. So it is working. The red means that the pitot heat is working. And since we're flying IFR, that's going to be a consideration today. So let's get back inside and turn the master off. Turn everything else off minus the beacon. And now we're ready to start the rest of the pre-flight. So we've already done this step. Make sure the baggage door is locked. Make sure we remove the tie down. You want to check the controls, check their linkages under the tail here. We'll go to the trim tab. And also with the tail to, check the rudder and make sure there's no visual damage. And these, alrighty. Okay, now we're going to test the flaps. Make sure they got that little bit of wiggle room. Make sure they're on the rollers. The actuator arm is in there secure. And then the aileron, you'd come through, lift it up. You'd be looking at the hinges. That's what we're seeing here. Again, the actuator arm for the aileron right there. Make sure that's secure. Remove the tie down. And then this is making sure that this will clear your fuel drain ports if there's anything blocking it. Let's remove the chocks. I usually look for the cotter pin, check the tire inflation and tread, and look at the brake pads as well. Okay, now we're going to sump the fuel. So we're making sure it's light blue to indicate 100 low lead. There's no water, no sediment at the bottom. If there was, you just keep clicking this drain more until you don't see that anymore. Okay, come up here, we'd check the fuel. We'd remove this fuel cap. Dip it, so I just filled it up so we got full fuel. Okay, make sure the static port is clear. Sumping the fuel down below the cowling. Same deal, 100 low lead, no water, no sediment. Also checking the oleo strut, the exhaust pipe, the condition of the cowl flaps, tire inflation and tread. Now we're checking the propeller for any damage. And then we're going to check the intake to make sure the intake is clear. You also want to make sure the air filter is clear. Okay, let's check the oil. Get just over 6 quarts. It's a good light tan khaki color, so it's still good fresh oil. And making sure the pitot tube on this, the static port on this side is clear. It's right down here. Okay, now we're checking the fuel quantity on the left wing. Again, it's full. And sumping the fuel, left wing. Remove the chocks, tire inflation tread, cotter pin, brake pads, and also check the hydraulic line for any leaks. Okay, we'll remove the tie down, test the stall warning, and make sure this port is clear of the fuel drain. So with the stall warning, you want to go into the cabin, turn the master on, and you can hear the stall warning, the horn or the buzzer actuating in the cabin. So when you have that electric style, Star warning, you typically want to try to check that too. Okay, left wing. You know, at the wingtip, you'd also want to make sure you're checking for any damage right at the wingtip. Then we'll lift up the aileron and check your hinges and the actuator arm in the middle. Okay, the flaps, make sure they got the wiggle room. Check to make sure they're on the rollers. Actuator arm is secure. And now we're done. We're back inside the cabin. Alright, so getting this thing started, we'll get all the levers forward for a quicker prime. We'll just make sure the parking brake is on, master on. Let's close the door. You know, make sure your seat belt is on, seat back is secure and set properly. Get the zoom reset here. Alright, so we're going to make sure the circuit breakers are all in. Sometimes if these pop out, they can be hard to see when they're popped out. So sometimes you could just go through and click all these. That'll make sure they're in. Alright. Cowl flaps open, fuel left tank, trim reset. Okay, so now we're going to watch fuel flow down here. We'll run the fuel pump. About 4 seconds is probably good on there. Go ahead and reduce the throttle and then cut it just crack it just a little bit. Mixture idle cutoff, and now we just make sure that the area is secure. It's clear outside. And now we start the engine. Let's get the mixture in. There we go, it's started. Get the throttle up to just about 1,000. Okay, just under 1,000 for a cold engine. We'll check the oil pressure. It's in the green within 30 seconds. And the ammeter is charging. And the fuel quantity is indicating full, so that's good. And you see we have a decent amount in the airspeed indicator. We have about a 14 knot wind here, I think. But we'll check that with the AWOS. Alright, so let's go ahead and lean out the mixture a bit. We'll get that throttle up to 1,000. Avionics on, flaps up. Alrighty, so avionics wise, we're going to want to set some frequencies. So coming down here to Chico, let's go look at some Chico info real quick. You can get the frequencies right here, or if you have your airport facility directory, or if you just have your sectional chart too. Actually, I'll just show you right here. Here's our airport diagram for Chico. You always want to have your airport diagram if it's available. Usually any towered airport is going to have it, and some non-towered airports have it too. So up here in the top left are your frequencies. ATIS is on 1967. So remember, I always put weather, COM2. So let's do 1967. There it is. Remember, if you have to change the smaller numbers, you just pull out the small knob. See, now it's not doing 67, so I have to pull it out. Then it'll go there. We'll swap that over because we need that right now. And then let's put Chico Tower 121.0 up here. So there's Chico Tower. We need ground, so Chico ground is 121.9. And anytime they say ground 0.9, it always means 121.9. So anytime they say 0.9 in the number, it's 121 and whatever that number is. So 121.9. So we got ground, tower, ATIS. Let's get ATIS at Reading. So with the Reading airport diagram, their ATIS is on 124.1. You always want to be pre-planned as much as possible, especially for an IFR flight. You always use all the frequencies you can. Alrighty, so let's get some frequencies for the nav radio side. So what are we going to need? Let's take a look at our route. Where did it go? It's over here. So we're not really going to use the Chico VOR, we're going to be using the Red Bluff VOR, and what we're looking at here is a low en route chart. I got world low, this is on SkyVector. You can do en route L2, so this is the physical chart. So I just do world low, so I don't have to worry about switching charts. And we'll talk about the chart later, so let's get the frequencies though. So Red Bluff VORTAC is on 15.7, so 115.7. There it is, we'll switch that over. And coming off of this VOR, so this is this black line coming off of the VOR, this is the route we're going to intercept. This is known as a Victor Airway, this is Victor 332. So after we take off from Chico, we're going to intercept this Victor Airway and go straight to the VOR. And so a Victor Airway goes from Victor Airways go from VORs to VORs, as you can see. And it's still pretty much the primary way of navigating IFR. And so you want it, sometimes you got to figure out when you change over from this VOR to the next VOR. So let's say you were going from Red Bluff to the next point. So we're navigating off the 122 radial. All these numbers are magnetic, not true. So the 122 radial from Red Bluff, we're following this along until we see there's this little like S here. This is a VOR changeover point, which means after this point then you use the Hangtown VOR. Seems like such a weird spot for it, but that's where they put it. And then from here, then you could continue on this Victor Airway until you get to the next VOR. So if you go between two VORs and you don't see that little S, then that just means you find the halfway spot roughly, and that's when you change over. So you will be operating from this VOR, and then halfway through, you switch over to navigating to this VOR. Alright, let's get back to our route. So Red Bluff, the next frequency we're going to need is going to be the ILS itself. So let's get that in, and I'll explain all these charts in a little bit. So the ILS we can get off the plate, and the localizer frequency is 108.7, that's up here. So we'll tune that in, 108.7. Okay, we got that. And I'm going to put 15.7 into COM2 as well, because I'll probably want to navigate that NAV2 and the ILS on NAV1. And let's see what else we might need. Okay, we're going to need the Reading VOR as well, so that's 108.4, so we'll get that down here. Again, we're using up all the frequency boxes. Okay. So let's go, while we're waiting for this engine to warm up still, waiting for cylinder head temperature and oil temperature to come up into the green. Okay, so starting with the low en route chart. So we talked about how you got VOR to VOR navigation is a Victor Airway. They got them all labeled here. You'll want to find out what altitudes you got to fly on these Victor Airways, and you go along the route until you see this number here. So this 6,000 sitting over the Victor 332, that's saying that the minimum en route altitude, or MEA, is 6,000 feet. So you have to fly this altitude. Now, on this little short flight we're doing, obviously we're not going to get the 6,000 as soon as we get to this line, and realistically you wouldn't try to intercept the line. That they'd probably just give us direct to Red Bluff VORTAC and then as filed, which is just getting onto the ILS. But if you want to intercept this, we'll climb up a little bit, maybe to 3,000 or 4,000, because then the approach is going to take us right back down. So otherwise, if we're actually getting onto the route for some en route navigation, 6,000 feet is our minimum en route altitude. And as you can see, if you start turning down this airway, Victor 200, the MEA goes up to 11,000. And so IFR, they're giving you at the very least 1,000-foot terrain clearance over non-mountainous areas and 2,000-foot terrain clearance in mountainous areas. Now they also have to guarantee signal coverage so you can actually navigate on the route, so that's why the MEAs end up being higher. what you're seeing below here, this altitude with the asterisk, that's a minimum obstruction clearance altitude. So it's more of an emergency altitude. So if you have to, you can get down to here, and that's going to guarantee you terrain clearance, and it'll guarantee you navigation signal reception if you're within 22 miles of the VOR. On the MEA, you get your navigation reception all throughout. I'm not going to talk about every point on a chart, only what's really necessary for this flight. We'll kind of build our knowledge as we go along in these videos. And you can also read it into basically every single symbol you see here. You go to the Aeronautical Chart User's Guide, just Google that, and on page 52 is where they start talking about all the IFR charts. Otherwise, before that's all your VFR stuff. It's a very good supplement. This is what the cover looks like, Aeronautical Chart User's Guide. So take a look at that to really look at all the symbols. Okay, so once we cross the Red Bluff VOR, then we're just going to get onto the approach plate. So now we're looking at an approach plate. This is what gets you finally into the airport. And so we have a pilot briefing area on the top, gives you frequencies, course, a bunch of info and frequencies. And then the middle section is the planning section, which tells you, it gives you a top-down view of the approach and headings to fly. And then down here is the profile view. This gives you a side view of your approach, so you can see the vertical profile of it. And so you can see that you're pretty much starting the approach at 3,000, descending down the 2,700, and then into the runway from there. And then down here we have our minimums, which is how low we can really go and what kind of visibility we need. Down here in the bottom left is a little mini airport diagram to give you some extra info on the layout of the stuff around the airport. So starting from the top, typically you just brief this in flight, but we got a little bit more info to cover. So this is for the city of Redding, California. It's the ILS or localizer DME runway 34 into Redding RDD. You also want to check the currency of the chart. So this is good from 8 December 2016, so that was yesterday, to 5 January 2017. So this is a current chart. Okay, so now we see the localizer DME frequency is 108.7. This channel 24 is a military thing, so just disregard that. Your approach course is going to be 342 degrees. The runway landing distance is 7,003 feet. Your touchdown zone elevation is 499 feet. The airport elevation is 505 feet. Alright, so then you have a bunch of notes here. And you got when local altimeter setting not received. You got to use the Red Bluff altimeter, and then you have to increase all decision altitudes and minimum descent altitudes by 80 feet. The straight-in localizer 3-4 categories C and D and E visibility, a quarter mile, and circling categories C and D. So you read through all this stuff, and that's talking about increasing minimums down here. So when it comes to different minimums, first you have to look at what category you're going to be at, whether you're A, B, C, D, or E, and those are going to be based off your approach speed. And off the top of my head, category A is going to be basically 90 knots and below, and B is going to take you up from 90 knots. So most of our GA planes are going to be category A. So then, as you can see, so this is the straight in, that's what the S stands for, straight in, ILS 3-4. The minimums are the same across the board. You can go down to 699 feet MSL, so 699 feet on the altimeter, and you have to have a half-mile visibility to do the approach. And this number here is saying it's going to take you 200 feet above the ground, so that's your AGL. And then these are military minimums down here, so don't worry about that again. Now if you don't have a working glide slope on your plane, you can downgrade this to a localizer approach. And so once you get past your final approach fix, then you can only drop down to 1,140, and you have to have a half-mile visibility. And you see this would take you down to 641 feet above the ground versus 200 feet that the ILS takes you down. Then you got circling approach. So if we're gonna do the approach to runway 34, but then we want to actually land on 16 due to the wind speed, then again it's only going to take you down to 1140, which will be 635 feet above the ground, and you have to have a mile visibility. So we went from a half mile to having a mile to do like a mini pattern around the airport. That's what circling minimums are for. Circling approach is when you do a little pattern once you get down there, and you have to maintain sight of the runway. So this up here again is telling us that if we're using the red bluff altimeter instead of the Reading altimeter, we have to change these minimums. And then VDPNA, this is visual descent point, not authorized when using red bluff altimeter setting. That is this point down here. So if you get on the approach and you get to 3.2 DME off of the Reading localizer, and if you see the runway, you can just begin a normal visual descent from here. And DME is distance measuring equipment, and that's just going to tell you how far away you are from the station basically. So the localizer system is basically right near the end of the runway. And then you can also get DME off this VOR. The VOR itself is right here. The VOR is the hexagon, and the DME is the rectangle, so this is a VOR DME at Reading. And so if it's referencing the Reading VOR, you're going to see it like this. So this is the Reading VOR RDD, and this is the 044 radial. So that's what the R stands for, radial. So when you're on the approach though, and you're doing DME to find your fixes, it says L RDD. This is the localizer for Reading, so it's the Reading localizer. It's a different unit than the VOR. So it'll give you different DME readings from the localizer to the VOR. And it says right here, use the Reading localizer DME when on the localizer course. Okay, so we talked about the minimums. So coming in, we're going to be at about 3,000 feet. We're going to cross Dibble intersection. And then once we cross Dibble, we can descend down to 2,700 feet. And so the line below the altitude indicates an altitude floor, so you cannot descend below that. If you have the line above the number, you can't go above it, and if there's lines on top and bottom, then you have to be at that specific altitude. Now once you get onto this X, this is your final approach fix, and so that's going to be the Lassen intersection, and that's going to be 8 DME off of the Reading localizer. Now, so backing up a bit, we have IAF, which is initial approach fix. That's what's getting you started on the approach. You have some intermediate fixes, which is IF here, so Dibble's an intermediate fix. And then your final approach fix is right here, and that's going to be Lassen, like we said, which is also an initial approach fix, because if you're coming in from the north or some other direction, as you can see, you'll be a little higher up, and you have to do what's called a procedure turn to come back in. So this is showing you as you're coming down to that. So the procedure turn, let's say you are coming in right from the north, you cross over the Reading VOR, you go outbound, or you go outbound on the localizer back course is what you do. Then you make a right-hand turn to a heading of 207, fly that for a minute, then make another right-hand turn to 027, and then come back and intercept that localizer course inbound. So what I mean by back course, this localizer is meant to go this way, and you see the shading on the right side of this arrow. That means if you're flying this way, if the shading is on the right side of your flight, then you're going the proper direction basically, and the needle will sense normal. So the localizer needle is just like the VOR, it's a vertical needle, and you just chase it. But if you're flying the back course, like if you're coming from the north, you have to fly the localizer back course, which means the shaded area is on the left side of your plane. That means the needle is going to go the opposite direction. So if the needle goes to the right, so this needle here, if it goes to the right, you have to go to the left to drag it back. That's how a localizer back course works. And it's also cool with this instrument here, this HSI, if you just set it to the inbound course, you don't have that, it removes that reverse sensing. we'll talk about that and demonstrate that in later flights. Today we're just going to do a simple ILS approach. Alrighty. These little triangles here, these are the intersections that we're talking about, and then so some of these intersections fall right on the approach course here. Alrighty, so then if you have, as we're coming down that visual descent point, this big heavy V, that's at 3.2 dMe off the localizer, and then your missed approach point is going to be at 1.3 dMe. If you're doing the localizer approach, or if you're on the ILS, your missed approach point is when you get down to 699 on the altimeter. Now if you have to do a missed approach, there's a graphical missed approach right up here. So you climb straight ahead to 1100 feet, and then you make a climbing right turn to 5,000 feet via heading 090. You're going to intercept the Reading 044 radial, and you take this to Itmore intersection and hold. So in the plan view, you're following this dotted line, so climb straight ahead to 1100, climbing right turn, heading 090 to 5,000 feet, intercept this 044 radial off of the Reading VOR, take this to Itmore intersection right up here, and hold. And then they have it in textual form right up here. Missed approach, climb to 1100, then climbing right turn to 5000 via heading 090, and the Reading 044 radial to Itmore intersection, which is also Reading VOR 12 DME, and hold, continue climb and hold to 5000. So holding, we'll go, that's another separate lesson on its own, but briefly we follow this path, we get to Itmore, which is going to be identified by the DME, or we could identify it with the Red Bluff VOR. You see how these two lines come together? So if we just have those two radials displayed on nav1 and nav2, then we can identify Itmore by that. And it's also off the Red Bluff 31 DME. Quick note about DME, so Reading VOR is a VOR with DME. Red Bluff is a VORTAC, and VORTACs have DME automatically. So we get to this hold, and this is a left-hand turn as indicated by these arrows, so we get to this intersection and we just turn left, and that's called a direct entry, and we'll explain why in later segments. Alright, I think we've beaten this chart to death enough, especially for this basic flight. So what we need to do is unfog the window again. Let's get that window open here, the windscreen. So we're on ground, and you'll gotta get a location. I think we can just say we're at the GA ramp. So there's the tower. We look at the airport diagram. Tower's here. We're right over here. So we're basically in front of the terminal building, we could say. And we want to take off northbound, and we need an IFR clearance as well. So what you would do calling ground is you'd say Chico ground, Cessna 60587, ready for IFR taxi to Reading. And so you'd have your IFR flight plan on file, they'd pull that up, and they give you an IFR clearance saying, like Skyline 60587, cleared to the Reading Airport as filed, climb and maintain 4,000 feet, departure frequency is they'll give you that frequency and then squawk like 0327. So then you'd read that, be writing that down as they're talking to you, and then you read that back to them, and you just word for word read it back, and then they'll say read back correct, and then they'll give you your taxi instructions as well. And so in this case, the winds are out of the south are from 130. So they'll be telling us to taxi 130. So we also have to get ATIS. So let's get that ATIS before we forget. So COM 2.
Kilo, Charlie, India, Charlie, automated weather observation 2041 Zulu. Wind 125 at
125 and 12. So this should be using runways 13. We got 1300 broken. Temperature dew point are the same. Altimeter 3014. 3014. So there's that. Oh, that was interesting. They just gave us as a weather. They didn't give it as an ATIS. So this would normally be an ATIS, at least when the tower is in operation. So you'd have that ATIS code. It'd also tell you what runways are being in use. So in this case, runways 13 left and right would be in use, and we'd say we have information delta or something like that. So we need to get that that departure frequency. So what we can do then is we have to go to the airport facility directory. And if you have ForeFlight or any one of those other apps, this is far easier. You don't have to go to many different documents. Wait. Oh, we clicked on Red Bluff. Chico. So AFD, your chart supplement. You come down to the bottom here. This is where you're going to get your communications. So your CTF ATIS. Here's Oakland Center approach departure control on 132.2. Okay, so from the top we say Chico ground, Skylink 60587, ready to taxi IFR to Reading. They come back, say Skylink 60587 cleared to the Reading Airport as filed, climb and maintain 4000, departure frequency 132.2, squawk 0347. So then we say Skyline 587 cleared to the Reading Airport as filed, climb and maintain 4000, contact departure 132.2, squawk 0347. They'd say read back correct. So now we need to punch all this stuff in. So squawk 0347. And we don't need ATIS anymore. We would have told them we had information delta. So we'll swap that out. And then what we can do is we don't have a billion standbys for nav1. We can put that departure frequency here, 132.2. And just leave that down there, because then we're going to ultimately put it up here, because we still have to be on ground the taxi and then tower to take off, and then we switch. Okay, so we got all that, and now we'll tell them we're ready to taxi if they haven't given us the instructions yet. So then they're going to say Skyline 587, taxi to runway 13 left via Romeo Hotel. So then we repeat that back. Skyline 587, taxi 31 left via Romeo and Hotel. So then we're cleared to taxi. You'd want to write that down if you don't remember. Okay, so we're all ready to taxi here. Do our brake check. And let's get taxiing. So, as we're taxiing, we want to think about what are the two most important things on an IFR flight. And the answer to that question is the next two things. You always want to be ready for those next two things. Come on, Cessna, turn. I was a little bit used to the direct steering of the Pipers I've been flying lately, and I just put rudder, and the Cessna didn't want to turn. You know, you got to use brakes for these Cessnas. Probably needs a little bit more mixture. Alright, so we're on Romeo. That's the main taxiway next to the ramp, as we saw in the taxiway diagram. And we see this is Hotel coming up. So we're taking Hotel. It's basically just staying on the edge of the ramp here, taxiing all the way down. You can see the clouds kind of clipping the tops of the mountains over here. And this cloud should be getting lower as we go northbound. looking around for traffic. Okay, we can see we're on hotel, and this is runway 13 left. So we're going to pull off to the side to do some final preparations. I'll show you guys the weather. We'll get our avionics set up. Do a quick little run up and get out of here. Alright. This is good enough. Just gonna get the power up to 1000. Set the parking brake. Okay. Let's look at that weather real quick, see if it's changed at all. I'll just hit refresh. Alright, so Reading is showing a red dot for IFR. And the top line is the METAR. Winds are calm, 2-mile visibility, rain, mist, that's the RA, BR is mist. Overcast at 500 feet. Temperature and dew point is 8 Celsius, altimeter 3009. The remarks, A02 means it can detect precipitation. Rain began 23 minutes after the hour. And sea level pressure, and then the P with the zeros and the sevens, those are hourly precipitation reports. Don't really have to worry about that. So we got 2-mile visibility, overcast 500 feet. So it's gone up a little bit. It was a little bit lower, but this is still good for an ILS approach. And especially the visibility. You always have to make sure you have your visibility. Red Bluff is a little bit worse. They got 1.5-mile visibility and 400 overcast. And Chico's doing better now. It's margin of VFR that broken at 1300. So like I said, we'll be navigating off of Red Bluff. So we see we're going to navigate on the 122 radio. But remember, we're going to the station, so we don't want to have 122 at the top. So for all of us that don't do mental math very well in the heads, 180-degree difference of 122, we need to move this course arrow. We want to fly to the station, but it's a 122 radio, so put 122 at the tail. So we'll drag it this way. So here's 120, that's about 122 right there. So we're going to be on a heading of 304-ish. Okay, so that's the initial. After we take off, we're going to climb to meet that. And we're taking off on 13, which is going south. So we'll make a right-hand turn and intercept that radio. Okay, what else are we going to need? Once we get to the Red Bluff Vortac, as you can see from the instrument approach procedure, from Red Bluff, you just take a heading of 322. We're going to fly the 322 radial, which I think is right in line with it actually if you look at the heading, and that'll intercept your localizer course. So I'm going to put 322 that was. So 322 we'll put down here. 322. Because then I want to have this one set up for the localizer at that point. Okay. So we're here, we don't need ground anymore. We'll switch over to tower and fog that window again. Actually, that defrost is running actually. Where's it? Yeah, defrost on. Alrighty. So now we want to put departure 132.2, that's Oakland Center. 132.2. So there we go. Once they say contact departure, then we just switch over to departure and check in with them. Alrighty. As you can see, you really got to focus on doing the navigation pre-flight, getting all this stuff set up. So quick run up, mixture rich. Let's take this up to about 1800, 16, 17, 18. Okay, temperature, pressure, vacuum ammeter, fuel quantity, cylinder head temperature, that's all good. Right mag, a little choppy, both. Left mag, just a little bit. Let's just burn some of these off real quick. They're doing alright though, just might as well burn them off a little bit while we're doing this annunciator panel test. That's all good. Burn off the other mag. Alright. I think that's gonna be good. Yeah. Alrighty. Let's exercise the propeller. Alright, that's all good. Let's get this down to idle. And back to 1,000. Alright, landing light on, nav lights, strobe lights. Fuel both. Trim neutral cowl flaps open. Okay, so now we're ready to take off. We're with tower. We say Chico Tower, skyline 60587, ready to go, 13 left. Now they're going to say skyline 587, clear for takeoff, 13 left. Right down a departure approved. We repeat that back and we get going. Plug our headset in. Okay. Now as a little note, for Part 91 operators, like just private pilots, you can take off 0 visibility, 0 ceiling. But it's not very smart to do so, because then if you have an emergency you have to come back to the airport, then you don't have the minimums required to come back and land. And what I was just doing is checking for traffic, even though it says sim, I'm by myself. Okay, let's get the power to full. And it looks like we do have our full power. Engine instruments in the green. Airspeed is alive. Let's go ahead and pull back. That nice strong headwind. Okay, a little bit right rudder there. We'll climb at 80. Climb extra well today with that nice headwind from 125, so just a little bit from the left. Alright, so we want to be identifying nav1 to make sure it's actually working right, so we'll hit nav1. Make sure that's pulled out. See that that's in, that's out. Alright, let's make this left-hand turn. Alrighty. We've identified nav1, so we know the signal is reliable. And on that HSI below my heading attitude indicator here, it gives a good visualization of the course. So that's what we're going to turn to. We're going up to 4,000. And you can also use this ADF here, since we're not actually using ADF. You use it as a numbers reminder. So I'll put this on the 4 to remind myself that I'm going up to 4,000 feet. So now what I'm doing is I'm making my heading so that the course deviation indicator here is sitting right below my current heading, and that helps give you a good intercept angle to bring in that course. As you can see, we're starting to get into the clouds a little bit at 2100, so we might tell tower that as a little pilot report. Okay, just monitoring our temperatures, maybe get the nose down a little bit. We can climb at full power, but it's probably not smart to climb at VY all the time, you know. You want to get some good altitude gain once you take off. But once you take off, maybe lower the nose, get some extra cooling in there. Okay, that course is slowly coming in on the HSI. See, in the clouds, you really have to start just focusing on those instruments. I'm trimming the airplane for about 100 knots. We're getting a decent climb right here. Move the heading bug over a little bit. Monitoring the gauges. And with an instrument scan, you always want to start with the attitude indicator and then go to 1 or 2 instruments at a time back to the attitude. So we're at 3, so we have 1,000 feet to go. Back to attitude, make sure it's doing what you want. Heading, attitude, all that stuff. Always incorporate your engine instruments in the scan periodically. Gonna make a little bit more of a right turn. Okay. In Skyline 60587, contact departure. So we say over to departure 587. Click that. So now we'd say Oakland Center, Skyline 60587, 3,500, climbing 4,000. And you notice I don't say with you. I don't say I don't say we're at 3,500, 4,000. You want to avoid saying the words 2 and 4 over the radio, and cutting out just the unnecessary words. So all you do is basically introduce yourself and say altitude at, climbing to. And so then they come back saying, like Roger, radar contact so many miles north of Chico or something. Altimeter 3014, I think it was. You just repeat back the altimeter 3014. 587. Okay, we're at 4,000 feet. Let's get it leveled off here. I have a slight suspicion that that attitude indicator airplane is pitched up a little bit high, so that'll make things tricky. Let's reduce our power to about 23. Get the RPM back to whatever. This is some mid-range. Okay, so we're almost on our airway. Now we're going to the Red Bluff Vortex. We got to get that altitude back. I'm gonna adjust this a little bit because that is definitely off a little bit. That was throwing me off. The orange airplane was above the white line, but we were descending. And so typically in a real airplane, when you're sitting on the ground, you want to adjust that orange airplane to meet the white line. But I've noticed sometimes in the sim I've done that and then it's been off, so it gets a little bit tricky. Alright, so our power is good. Now we have to get our cowl flaps closed. Let's go ahead and, we're in visible moisture, so let's get the pitot heat on. The outside air temperature is 7 Celsius, so that's pretty good. Okay, we're on the airway, we're coming up on the VOR. Once we cross the Red Bluff Vortex, we're going to be heading, we're going to fly outbound on the 322 radio, and we'll swap this frequency over to the ILS frequency. Which is 1087. And then for missed approach, once we get on the approach, we can also swap nav 2 down for 1084, which is Redding's DME. So we need to get DME set up for Red Bluff. So Red Bluff's frequency is 15.7, so come down here to your DME and tune 15.7. It doesn't want to work. So I'm going to try remote. So what remote does, RMT down here, is it's going to pull it from a frequency from nav 1. So whatever you have in nav 1 is going to be what it's pulling it from. So I'm not sure why the frequency doesn't work. So we'll unpause. Yeah. Just kick that over to remote for now. So right now we're at 13.6 DME away from the Red Bluff Vortex. So let's try to stay on the airway. We got to turn left a little bit. I see we got to climb a little bit. The engine instruments are doing fine. We can lean. Right about there. Okay, keeping up a scan. We're at 12.3 out. We have a ground speed of 154 knots. We're indicating 131 knots. Remember, at 4,000 feet, there's a difference of your true airspeed. Actually, no, in this slightly turbulent IFR conditions, let's try to calculate true airspeed here. We're at 4,000 feet, 7 Celsius, so I need to line that up over here. Let's see here. Best way to do this, we'll zoom in. So see, we got temperature up here, little tiny blocks, and you have to line up your altitude, 4,000 to 7 Celsius. So here's 4,000 at 0. That's like 10. That's about close. 4,000 at 6 degrees Celsius. So now this in the white window here is showing you your true airspeed. So we're indicating 131 knots. Our true airspeed is about 142 knots, and we have a ground speed of 158 knots. So we have a little bit of a tailwind, a little bit of ground visibility too, but hopefully that changes as we get going to Red Bluff. Sometimes when I'm practicing IFR in the sim, I'll just take it down like this, because as soon as you get that visual reference outside, it really breaks it. Same thing in the real world. You come down to the instruments and you already feel a little bit disoriented. In other words, we got 8.2 to Red Bluff. Got to go left a little bit more to get on that course line. Okay, now they might say Skylink 587 descend and maintain 3,000. So now we say down to 3,000, 587. So let's reduce our power a little bit. Go ahead and let the nose down to 3,000 feet. Okay, we need to start tuning some frequencies now for tower and all that at the next place. So real world, and like I can do right here on my desk too, I can use ForeFlight, but then I can't show you guys what I'm doing. So when you're coming up to the approach plate, see, we're approaching Red Bluff. Once we get to Red Bluff, we're going to fly to the course. So we're with Oakland Center right now, and you look here seeing that 132.2 is your final frequency. That's where we're on right now. So I can safely put tower 119.8 up here and COM1 standby. So 19.8 for the tower. Here we go. So now we're ready for that handoff. And then ATIS 24.1, which we already got. So we're going to listen to that, and then ground is 0.7. So let's do 121.7. We're descending down to 3,000. Okay, ready to go again. Okay, we're pretty much on course here. We got to keep that nose down. Go down. Again, always back to the attitude indicator, pick an instrument, loading up the plate onto my ForeFlight right now, ILS 34. So we're going to cross Red Bluff VOR, come in at about 3,000 feet, and once we cross Dibble, I'll show you guys, pause it. So we're going to cross Dibble over here at 3,000, and we'll descend down to 2,700 feet, wait for the glide slope to come in, and we should be 8 DME from the Reading localizer at 2,700 feet. That's our final approach fix, and we should be going down with the glide slope from there. Alright, so we're coming up in 3,000, we're 3.5 from the Red Bluff Vortec. Alright, 3,000, let's move our ADF as a reminder, 3,000. Okay. We'll get the power back in a little bit. Now we gotta level off here. Alright, we'll go back to the attitude, altitude, let's move the heading bug. And moving the heading bug is good, especially if you plan on using the autopilot Always a good habit. Okay, so that needle's getting a little bit more sensitive because we're a mile. Now as a note with DME, it's saying we're 1.1 nautical miles away from the station. You have to note that we're at 3,000 feet, and so DME is reading a slant range. So just to give you, that's not what I want, just to give you a picture. So slant range, we have the station down here, we're up here, it's saying we're 1.1 miles away. We're not 1.1 this way, we're not 1.1 that way, it's slant range. We're 1.1 this way. So if you're at 6,000 feet and you're right above the station, the DME is going to read 1 nautical mile. Okay, so it's just something to think about. Alright, 3,000. Alrighty. Now at this point, you know, they could give us get up. They could give us radar vectors for the final approach course. And so to kind of simulate that, but we're also going to do the pilot nav following this route. Okay, so we've flapped, we have a from signal, we're going off, we got fly heading 3, 2, 2. I'm losing that altitude. Okay, so now they would say, you know, turn right heading 320, maintain 3,000 until established on the ILS localizer, and maintain established until established on the localizer, cleared for the ILS localizer DME runway 34 approach. So then we read that back, we'll say right 320, 3,000 feet till established, cleared for the ILS 34 587. And so that radio code will go. Alright, so now we gotta maintain this. We need to swap over to the localizer here, 108, which is approach course 342. Okay, now we have to identify it, nav 1. Alright, so we've identified the ILS, the localizer frequency. We know it's given us a good signal. And you can see how they're giving you this intercept angle. So we're maintaining the 322 radial off of Red Bluff, 15.2, nav 2. We've got 108.7, which is nav 1. There's our glide slope. Alrighty, so I've had to reload the flight with an airplane that has nav 1 and 2 with both glide slopes because the DME was not working on the localizer. So, but the DME is working with the VOR, which is 108.4. We're at 21.2. Need to reduce this power. This plane is fast. This Comanche. So we're at 3,000. And we're on the 320 radio. We have to go right a little bit for Reading VOR. We have Reading Vortex is COM 1 here. We're flying the 322 radio. A little bit of turbulence here. Okay, so we're flying the 322 radio. Oh, carb heat. We get carb heat in this plane. I went from a fuel-injected airplane to a carbureted airplane, so we're going to have to leave that out probably. You can hear it's raining a little bit. So 322 radio. And I can change it to distance here, so if there's 18.5. You can see over here on nav 2 that localizer is starting to come in. I have the green heading bug here set to the inbound course. And 18 miles on the localizer DME at least would be Dibble. And as you can see, we're pretty much centered up on the localizer now, so I'm going to turn this inbound to the localizer course. Remember, we're flying the ILS off this one because now I got the DME off Reading VOR, which isn't the same as the localizer, but for the sake of finishing this flight, I just wanted to make this work. So we're using Reading DME. So now we're at 16.6. We're past Dibble, because if you remember, now being past Dibble at 18 DME, we can descend down to 2,700 feet, which lost my altitude a little bit, but let's reduce the power and descend down to 2,700. And at 8 DME, we're going to be at Lassen at 2,700 feet, and that will be the final approach fix. That's where this glide slope, the horizontal bar, should be neutralized. Okay, we really got to get this airplane slowed down here. Let's do some landing checks. Let's get the pump on, landing lights on, and get the mixture rich. So 2,700 feet is what we need now. We're going to wait here till we get to 8 DME. It's pretty turbulent right now. Adjust the trim. We're at 13.8 DME, so we're going to fly level here for a little bit. Now it's ballooning up. We're going to keep our speed controlled here. Just get that nose back down, attitude, altitude. Engine gauges are good. We're at 13 DME. We're starting to get a little bit left of the localizer, so we're going to go back to the right just a little bit. I'll go back to see that altitude now. It's really going up from the turbulence. So let's reduce the power, get the nose down, because we've got to reduce power for us to help get down, or else we're going to go even faster. We're trying to keep our speed under control. We're at 12.3 DME. Okay, we're getting back on the localizer. Let's look at the attitude indicator, get our heading back to the left. Getting a little bit nose down trim to help keep it down here. Really trying to fight the turbulence. Okay, we're at 11.5 DME. Remember, around 8 is when that glide slope should be centered. Keeping that carburetor heat out because we're in moisture at lower temperatures. Got everything out set up the way we had it. We got 32.2. They cleared us for the approach. So now they would have handed us off the tower. So we switched the tower frequency, 19.8. So then now we're just going to say Reading Tower, Comanche 6229er Papa on the ILS 34. You're just letting them know basically where we are. They just say Roger. And now we're just going to come down like this. So we're at 10 DME. We got to hold that 2,700 feet. Really should be plus 100 minus 0 on those tolerances. Okay, we're looking at the localizer, getting a little bit to the right. 9.4 DME. Waiting for that glide slope to come down. We can see a little bit of the terrain below us. The weather, last I checked, I think is around 800 feet now. The clouds. Okay, localizer's going right. We got to go right a little bit. We're losing a bit of altitude. We got to climb back up, so add a little bit of power. All hand flying, no autopilot. Okay, glide slope is alive. You see it's starting to come down. We have to get right a little bit to meet our localizer. We keep our 2,700 feet attitude indicator, altitude, attitude, heading, attitude, localizer. Let's get the heading back left a little bit. Alrighty. So as you can see, DME, so 7.5 at 2,700 feet is different than what it would have been on. Okay, so now we're at fine approach fix. Let's get the gear down, flaps. Okay, we're doing about 100 knots. The knots is on the inside. We're descending down with the glide slope. Let's get second notch flaps here. We'll get down to about 90 knots. And at 90 knots, you want to be about 480 feet per minute. Actually, I should say exactly 480 feet per minute at 90 knots. Now, obviously, you have to take into account winds, though. Now, looking over here, 500 feet per minute, right there, right where that VSI is. So, not a whole lot of room on the instrument. See, we have to go down a little bit. We got to get right just a little bit. Our heading is getting off. Okay, about 105 miles an hour is going to be 90 knots on this airspeed indicator. So we're just going to maintain that. And as a reminder, our minimums, not that, our minimums, we can go down to 699 feet. So basically 700 feet on the altimeter and a half-mile visibility. Alright, so I'll move the heading back because we've been having to crab a little bit, so we'll keep it right around there. Okay. Now we're doing 1,000 feet per minute, so that's why this glide slope is starting to come back up. So now we'll add a little bit of power, or just pitch back a little bit actually. That'll help us slow down. Here comes that weather now. Alright, we're at down to 1,800 feet. We're going down to 700. We got just over 1,000 feet to go. See, now we got the glide slope neutralized, so I'm starting to stabilize around 480 feet per minute. There's 105 miles an hour, which corresponds to 90 knots. Get the airplane trimmed out, power set. We're going to get the propeller to full, do a double check of the gear down. Okay, we're all ready for landing. Landing checklist is complete. Okay, got distracted. We got to get back left for that localizer. Reduce a little bit of power so we can help the airplane descend down at 90 knots. Because we don't want to build up airspeed, but we have to get down a little bit. So we reduce the power. And now I'm left of what I'm pretty sure the heading should be because of the winds. And so that'll help bring the, let's get a little bit more leftward. That'll bring the localizer in. Now pitch up, add a little bit of power, get our glide slope back, 480 feet per minute. About 500 feet per minute. That should hold the glide slope. That localizer's coming in. We're coming up on 1,100 feet. We're watching this here for the ILS. Okay, now that localizer's centered, let's get back on the heading. We're at 1,000 feet. And you might be hearing my iPad giving audio alerts. It's linked up to the sim. Okay, there's 900 feet. We're almost at minimums. You can see the lighting system, the runway. But let's keep coming down on the ILS a little bit more, because sometimes that visibility might come back down on you. You want to make sure you're on approach, and if you have to do a missed approach, you want to make sure you're ready to go. So here we go. We're coming up on minimums. There's minimums at 700 feet. We see the runway. We're going to land. So let's get that last notch of flaps out. And now we just fly down to the runway, so we're a little bit faster. Let's bring the power back out. There's definitely a crosswind from the right. So let's get a little bit left rudder. About 85 miles an hour. Let's get power to idle. Now we're just holding it off, holding it off. Oh, there we go. Pretty good landing. Try to neutralize that rudder right before we touch down, so the nose wheel isn't a little bit cocked on the runway. Let's pull back now and add a little bit of brake. We should be able to pull off to the left here. This is the runway. We'll just say tower told us to get off to make a left at this runway and then left on the taxiway here. Okay. Now we're coming clear. Rainy day here at Reading. This is the next set of weather we're getting here in NorCal. This will move down to Yuba City, I think. So now we're on taxiway Delta. Get past the hold short line. come to a stop, and ground would probably say Comanche 29 and Papa say intentions. We'll just say base of the tower. We'll park at the base of the tower. So now they're going to give us the taxi instructions, and that'll go something like, so they'll say taxi via Delta Bravo to the ramp. And so you look at your chart, you see we landed on 3-4. We'd make it a left at this runway and got off here at Delta now. So Delta and Bravo to the ramp. Here's the tower. And so you just repeat that back to them, and you're on your way to taxi. So then you want to clean up the airplane real quick. And we don't want to have pitot heat running on the ground. Let's lean the mixture a bit, bring the RPM up, get the carburetor heat off because it's not filtered air when you're running carb heat. Flaps up, trim reset, and let's go, because you don't know if someone's behind you, don't want to hold up the runway. So that was a pretty quick and dirty intro to IFR. I didn't want to completely scrap the video because there's a lot of concepts that were taught at the beginning. But we'll start refining some more IFR skills later on. Figured you guys would like to see this video anyways. But I'll probably end up doing another one in the future. We'll be doing approaches a lot for IFR training anyways. But here's the ramp, there's the tower. And this is the A2A simulations Comanche. Anything you get from A2A is going to be a wonderful choice for the most realistic aircraft you ever want simulated in any flight simulator. They just cannot be beat. We're going to park right in here at the base of the tower because that's what we said. And we're going to go right in the middle of all the helicopters because why not? That's the jet center to the right. I've been there before. One of my first instructors always said park like you own the place, so I think this counts. And that FSX bug of friction. A little bit stuck. I want to spin this around. Alrighty. Okay, I'm shutting down the airplane. Avionics off. Ground the magnetos, mixture out. Alright. Let's get the headset out. Master off. The prop is stopped. Now we'll get the key off and out. Set it on the dashboard. I always leave that beacon on. And let's make sure we get our yoke lock in here. Let's go outside to the wet world. So now we're gonna unload, close the door, pitot cover, tie downs, wheel chocks. Now the airplane's all buttoned up. We can go sit inside and wait for the storm to pass. Alright, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this first IFR video. Like I said, we'll be making a little bit more in the future, a little bit more refined. I'll figure out, I think that might be a simulator bug, or just a lack of updated nav aids where we weren't getting DME on the localizer, but we got DME on some of the VORs, so I'll have to look into that a little bit further. But I'll post any questions you have in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.